Chapter 10, Modes of Control. How do you control people? There are three modes of control. The first one is based on free market forces. So people control themselves and their behavior most of the time based on their self interest. They will, let's say, I'm trying to buy tires. I will buy the tires that are the cheapest. I will not tell the person I'm buying from saying, hey, you're not charging me enough. I will try to go to the cheapest, which is my self interest. So people control themselves by these free market forces. They go to the vendor they believe gives them the best value for the money that they are paying. So that's one mode of control. So if you want to control people in your team by attracting them to your team, then you want to really build the best team possible. They know that if they're in your team, that's their free market choice. They've decided to surrender their other team in favor of your team, and that happens if you give them the best deal in your team. So remember that you control people by giving them the best deal, like buying tires. If you are a really good boss, then they're gonna go pick you, right? So remember, that's a mode of control in some sense. You control their actions by giving them the best deal possible. Second, contractual obligations also control people, right? Today, I work at a pretty large company and I cannot talk about all the secrets at that company. So that's legal, contractual obligations that I have signed. It's intellectual property that I should never talk about. And so that is very critical. And that is what is my obligation. It's by law that I should never do that, right? Anything that, let's say you are driving your car and then you see the red light, you stop. You don't question what to do. Should I, if no one's looking? No, doesn't work that way. It's not ethical. It's not lawful. It just makes no sense at all to break the law. It's built for the common good and it's built to protect you. So that controls people. Contractual obligations between team members, like when they join, they sign long list of pages that says, hey, this is what I will do, this is what I will not do. So contractual obligations also is a mode of control, rules and regulations. Third, and then the last one, is cultural, and this is the most powerful, the most subtle. When you see an accident in a road that you are driving through, you're not it's not always on your self interest to like stop. Maybe you might get hit because you stopped because of concern and someone was traveling behind you. So it's not necessarily your self interest. It's also, there's no contractual obligation that you have to stop. It's someone else's job maybe, right? But you still stop. Why? Because there are certain cultural values that you have that is a genuine concern for the other person that makes you to stop. Makes you to stop to help them, get them out of the accident they are in. Similarly, in your organization, if you can build those cultural values that govern the surrendering of your self interest to the group interest, right, then that is powerful. Remember, you can never monitor or control a knowledge worker, and a lot of work today is knowledge work. Even if you have a software engineer sitting at the computer, they may just be doing something totally different. So it's no guarantee that someone's dialed in and checked in, that they're actually present at that meeting or they're actually doing the work. Knowledge work is very hard to control, but it can be controlled with this cultural control. The values control this, right? So as leaders, it's very critical for us to know, like, what are these modes of control, how people get attracted to things, and how do they control their own behavior. Why is this important? We live in this world where there is VUCA, right? That's the analogy. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. Volatile because it's there's certain things that you didn't think about. It's unexpected things happen. Let's say you were expecting certain supply of goods to come, but because of some disruption of a freeway, highway breakdown, there was a supply loss, and now you no longer have it. So there's volatility, there's changes and disruption that can happen because of the unknowns, right? And they could also be for a long period of time. And uncertainty is when the decisions are just not being made, or you don't know like what the competitor is doing. So there's uncertainty, there's complexity, right? Like even a simple software code really requires orchestration across the build tools. It requires the deployments to happen, it requires the monitoring to happen. So the simple tasks are no longer simple because they are interrelated, and its complexity is large. So even like if you want to operate in a country, there's so much that you have to think about. You might be good at that country, so then you are certain, but there's lots of things, there's lots of rules and regulations that you have to be aware of. So there's complexity of work, and there's also ambiguity. Let's say you now decide to move into a new market. It's not your core competence, so there's ambiguity, right? And so there are approaches to solve for each of these, but typically when a new person joins your team, right? We are trying to learn about high output management, right? So we're trying to get to the best. So how is all of this related? So if we acknowledge that the world is VUCA, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, then you will be more empathetic to the person coming in your org, right? You will know, they'll probably fall into these four quadrants, right? When they come in with self-interest as the highest, and they'll be governed by free market forces. They'll only come to your team if their self-interest is being met. That's number one. Once that's done, then they'll also be governed by these contractual obligations. There are do's and don'ts that they're done in any team. So that's contractual obligations. But then what differentiates you and gets them to be able to deal with this VUCA world that we are all part of is these cultural values. It's the values that surrender their self-interest down to the group interest. When someone comes in new, especially if a senior leader comes in, they're actually in this danger zone, right? Because they have this huge VUCA factor, they have high self-interest, and if they don't quickly surrender that self-interest to group interest and look at the cultural values of the org and actually go with optimizing for the group, then that's going to be a danger zone. So you can only like cross your finger. That's what the book says. It's quite interesting how Andy Grove has thought about all of this, right? And so quite important to build, quite important to build these cultural values, because individual motivation shifts based on where you are, depending on the kind of work you are in, what choices you're trying to make. So when we are in this situation, it's quite important for us to facilitate as leaders so that with cultural values, they can deal with this complexity, they can deal with ambiguity, they can deal with uncertainty and come out stronger amidst volatility. So as organization grows, right, the changes are rapid. Lots of changes. Rules are rapidly, being obsolete. Think about Uber, right? When they launched Uber, ride sharing, there was no rules in terms of like what is the governance, what is the insurance look like. Organizational environmental changes are happening rapidly. So the only mode of control, you can't even set all of those contractual obligations. You at best can work on the free markets. It gives the best offer possible to your new people coming by building the best class team. But then the differentiation is going to be in the cultural values part, where if you have a very strong team that trusts each other, that that has certain common objectives and values in terms of how they do things, then you have a differentiation. So spelling out those values and walking the talk as leaders, right? Like we need to walk the talk and do what's really important. We need to show by example how we live these values. And if we do that, then the employee would stay. They would stay even like, let's say there's an employee who's not getting promoted, and what's the incentive for them to stay when they've worked really hard? If they believe in you, if they believe that you're doing the right thing, they will stay. They will stay. Like the sales staff example in this chapter, the sales staff didn't leave for a year when there was nothing to sell. They just lost all the quota, but they still stayed. They still stayed because they believed in the company, they believed in the culture, they believed in their leaders, that they'll do what they're saying, they're genuine and authentic. So even things like, what should you do as a team? Should you focus more on quality versus quantity? Like, what are your values? What do you value as a team? So remember this one thing: can't really monitor a knowledge worker. If you get over it, build for values, articulate it, and live it as a leader. Thanks.